Friends, how are you? Welcome to Changing Tracks. Today, Lauren Scotto from Jacksonville, Florida is joining us. Lauren, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Christina.
Okay, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your family.
Like Christina said, like you said, I'm Jacksonville, Florida, born and raised. And I'm currently married, and we have 3 children, 2 on earth and 1 in heaven. And I'm a stay-at-home mom.
Can you tell us a little bit about what your life was like when you were a child growing up? What was your family like?
I'm an only child, and my parents are still married, and we grew up in a typical neighborhood. And my mom and I would go to church when I was little, and my dad always stayed at home. And I actually went to the Mormon church for a while when I was a little kid, and then one day I cried to my mom, and she was like, okay, well, we'll never come back. So we stopped going to church for a while, and then when I hit 3rd grade, my mom wanted me to have the Catholic education that she had growing up. So she was like, okay, we're enrolling you in the Catholic school. I want you to have the sacraments and everything like I had. Even though she didn't fully know the faith and the importance of the sacraments at the time, she wanted me to have it because she experienced it growing up. So that's when I started Catholic school, was in 3rd grade, and I received First Communion and First Confession and all that stuff in 3rd grade growing up.
Do you think the fact that your mom was Catholic and your dad wasn't influenced you in your childhood?
I don't think it had a big influence because my dad was kind of just, whatever you guys want to do. And my mom was the spiritual head of the household, I guess, technically. So her influence was on me, and how I grew in my faith was through my mom. My mom and I actually had our conversion kind of together once I came into high school. That's when she started growing in her faith is when I started growing in mine. So we kind of she was feeding into me, and I was kind of starting to come around at that point.
Okay, so more or less we can say that you were raised in a Catholic family. What did you do as a family? I mean, did you go to Mass together? Did you pray together?
We were the typical perfect cradle Catholic family, but it was just my mom and I would always go to Mass since my dad didn't do anything. So we would go to Mass every Sunday, and that was pretty much it. And then I went to Catholic school, and that's where I got my formation of the Catholic faith. But I always tell people it didn't form me an understanding of the Catholic faith because we took religion as a class, and it was just like every other class to me. I have to study for this test before I take it, and then as soon as I take it, it's all out of my head, and we're moving on to math now, So it never was really fully entered into my heart. I knew between right and wrong. My mom would always teach me the importance of right and wrong, and you should live your life with virtue and morals, but we never fully delved into why do we do that? Why is it important that we live a virtuous life?
Tell us a little bit about what life was like. You went to Catholic school. Was that school really Catholic? Did you practice your faith, or were you just going through the motions? What were your teen years like? Did you have any contact with God at that time? What was life like in high school?
Growing up all through there, I was good because my mom put the fear of God into me. I knew if I got in trouble or if I did something wrong, she would somehow find out and I would get in big trouble. So that was more of why I stayed good, why I stayed on track. And all through high school, I actually stayed on track too. I never drank before I turned 21, which is surprising to most people. Most people don't do that. So I was shocked I did it, but I was mostly scared to do it, and then my mom find out about it. So through high school, I never went to any big parties or anything like that. I hung out with my friends, but then I would go home that night and I wouldn't spend the night with, co-ed, mixture of group. I'd say towards the end of high school, that's when I kind of got into a relationship with a boy that was an unhealthy relationship. And at first he was, he was a nice guy, and I talked to him, and he would flatter me and everything like that. And so when we kind of started into our relationship, I didn't think about it at the time, but he was actually a manipulator, because we would hang out. We would always hang out at his house. We would always hang out like away from my family. And if we ever came to my house to hang out, we would hang out for maybe 10, 15 minutes, and then he'd be like, okay, let's, why don't we go somewhere else? And then we would leave. So he tended to pull me away from being with my family, and I would hang out there after work and, and then come home, and then we'd move on from there. But that relationship it kind of devolved big time. We like kissed and then went a little further, but past that, I was always scared to go a little too far. But that brought me into this more of a sinful relationship.
How old were you when you started this relationship?
I was senior in high school and then kind of going into college.
How did that affect you during this time?
So it was like bringing me down. I knew what we were doing was wrong. I felt it in my heart, but I couldn't stop. It was like a cyclical thing. Like every time we got together, this is just what we did, and now we're like stuck in it. Fortunately, my mom saw what was happening, that he was manipulating me away from her, and he was manipulating me like into just a bad situation. I don't know if she knows how bad, but and I remember we were at a bowling tournament and they were all there, and my best friend came and she was with us, and me and her and a bunch of other people were all hanging out with him. And then she came back and was like, I don't know what she sees in this guy. He's extremely annoying, like all these different things. And my mom was like, okay, well, this is them secretly talking, because my mom asked her, can you look at him and tell me if you see something in him that's like positive? And so she was like, no, I don't. And my mom's like, okay, well, we need to end it. So I remember that night we were sitting on our hotel bed, and my mom was just like, this isn't good. You need to break it off with him. And I was extremely furious that she was like saying this, but I also had enough respect for my mom, luckily, that I trusted her judgment, even beyond my own judgment, shockingly. Most people are like, well, you're just saying that because, but she told me to do it, and I pulled out my phone and broke up over text, that's great. And my friend was like looking over my shoulder and giving my mom the thumbs up behind me. And afterwards, I felt fine with it. I was like, I think interiorly, I knew that it was a bad relationship. And so I think I needed somebody to tell me, this isn't good, you need to get out of it. And so I think that helped, listening to my mom. And the next day, we all went to Islands of Adventure, which is a theme park. And it was all of us in a group. And he was just like acting like a complete jerk. And I was like, whoa, what is wrong with him? And my friend looked at me and she was like, this is how he always is. And I was like, well, he's not gonna ruin my day. And that was it. I guess I had been needing someone to tell me so bad that I just need to end it, that finally it ended, and I felt much better about it. So that was like a kind of a turning point in realizing that kissing this guy had put rosy colored glasses on, and I had looked past all his faults and, it moved through the relationship in a bad way.
What would you say to a person who finds themselves in a situation like you were in? They're in a bad relationship, but they don't have the strength to cut it off. They have that inkling that this might be bad for their soul or something's wrong, but they don't have the strength to do it. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, usually the people around you that you love have your best interest at heart. And my mom always told me that. That's probably why I trusted her when she said it. She's like, all these guys that are coming into your life, they are looking out for themselves. I am looking out for you. I love you. Your best friend, she loves you. So, it's always good to trust those that have known you for your whole life and are close to you and that you trust. I mean, they're not looking out for you in a selfish way. They want you to, be on the right path. And the boy, whoever comes into your life, they're looking out for their own good until, obviously you actually form a good relationship and get married or something. Then obviously that's your husband. But So I think it's good to trust those around you. And if multiple people are telling you that this relationship is divisive and it's bad, then it's probably good to listen to them and to just try to cut it off cold turkey and not talk to that person anymore and just move on with your life. Because I know sometimes it's hard to get out of that cycle and you feel like you have to keep going back to this person. But if you're going in a bad way and they're not bringing your soul closer to Christ, like you feel bad in their presence and you're feeling like this relationship is, I don't know, you feel gross in the relationship, it's not a positive one. It's probably best to, move on.
After you broke up with him, what was your experience? Did you regret it? How did your life play out after you broke up with him?
So I cut him off cold turkey and we never hung out ever again after that. So I think there was a sense of relief being out of it. And then obviously I felt a sense of remorse for where it had gone. And that's where confession came in extremely helpful because I went to confession and, God forgave my sins and I could now move on.
You said that this was in your last year in high school. Did you want to go to college? What was your life like in college?
Yeah, so I went to the University of North Florida, which is in northern Florida. And it's funny because my mom looked ahead of me and saw that the Catholic Ospreys were there, but it was called Focus at the time, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. And she was like, you should go check out their table. They table on these days. Like she really looked into it. And I was just like, oh. But I can't say no to spiritual things, like I feel bad saying no to anything that's spiritual. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll go check it out. So it's like the first week and you're a freshman in college, you're trying to make yourself known to people. And I went to the tabling. They had a bunch of clubs tabled on the green and sororities and all this stuff. And I go and stop by the Focus table because I'm like, my mom told me I had to come by. So I might as well check it out. And there was like a cute Focus missionary there. And he was talking to me. And then he was like, oh, what's your name? And I said, Lauren Pettit. That was my name at the time. And he was like, oh, your mom called us and told us you would be, stopping by. And I was like, oh my gosh, so embarrassing. I'm a freshman in college and my mom's calling these people. That was so embarrassing. But he was fine with it. He was like, oh, I wish all parents, got their kids to come to these things. And so they kind of signed me up in a Bible study and I was going to their prime times, which are monthly meetings with all the Catholic kids in the group. And this was a really small group. There's maybe 15, 20 people and you look around and you're like, some of them are nerds, but you go past it because you're like, we're all Catholic, this is fine, it's not a big deal, this is superficial. So I started going to a Bible study and the girl that was leading it, she kept saying to me, hey, I should get you into discipleship. And I was like, okay, whatever, but we never actually started doing it. And she kept bugging me about it and was like, well, when can we meet?
What is that discipleship?
Oh, discipleship. So the way Focus worked was there were student leaders up at the top and then all the rest of the students. So the student leaders would ask one of the students that came to things or was in their Bible study into discipleship. So they would kind of meet with you one-on-one, kind of do formation in the Catholic faith and then try to groom you into being a student leader. So that's what she wanted to do with me. I guess she saw potential. And she kept asking me like, okay, well, let's do discipleship. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And we never met. And then finally one day she was just like, we're meeting on Tuesday at 3:30 to do discipleship. And I was like, okay. And so God knew my personality. He knew I was whatever, let's just do it. But I'm not a firm person. So he knew I needed a firm person to just tell me what to do. And so I started meeting with her for discipleship and she brought me into student leadership. And once I was in student leadership, that's, I think, when I grew the most in my Catholic faith. Just because when you have to teach others the faith, you have to grow in it yourself to be able to teach it,
How did you grow in your faith? Can you give an example? Did you start studying more about your faith? Did you pray more, going to daily mass? How was that time for you?
Yeah, so going through the discipleship, I had to, study the faith more and learn from it. My mom was also growing in the faith at the same time. She would sit outside my room when I was getting ready for college, and she would like read from the catechism and be like, "Oh my gosh, isn't this amazing?" And I'd be like, "Okay." But I guess it sunk in. And so through that, I grew. And then also the sisters of the Home of the Mother were there, and they would do formation talks with the students as well. So we kind of would go to those. And I think it was my first formation talk I went to, random meeting. They were talking about the importance of the Eucharist. And I had before this, I had known other of the Catholic people, students in the group. They would say, okay, well, I got to get going to daily mass because it was at 12:10 then. And I was like, okay, great, see you later. Daily mass was something for them, but it wasn't something for me. That wasn't what I did. I go on Sunday, So I'd never thought about it before. And they were talking about the importance of the Eucharist and, Jesus being present in the Eucharist. And if we could receive the Eucharist every single day, why wouldn't we? And I just remember that when she said that, I thought in my head, yeah, why wouldn't I? So I remember going home that night and talking to my mom about it and be like, this is what the sister said, and why wouldn't we? And my mom's like, yeah, I'll go with you, sure. And from then, we started going to daily mass, and sometimes it would be 6:30 in the morning, depending on my schedule. Sometimes I go to 12:10. But the first couple weeks, God gave me the grace, the excitement. And then after that, it kind of dwindled down, and I was like, I really don't want to go. But luckily, my mom was going with me, and then she would wake up in the morning and be like, okay, let's go to daily mass. Are you ready to go? And I'd be like, yes. Like I said, I didn't like saying no to things that would help me grow in my faith. So that's what helped me keep going until I got past that rut of not wanting to go anymore. And then it just became a part of my life and my daily routine, and it felt weird when I would miss. So going to daily mass, receiving the Eucharist, and going to confession and all that stuff really catapulted me into the love of my faith. And going to daily mass helped me love mass on Sunday and understand it even more. Because I would go on Sunday and it would just be like, this is what we do. But then once I started going to daily mass, I started realizing what was happening during mass, and it meant more,
After this, you became more solid in your faith. Did you meet your husband at this time? More or less, now I want to ask what happened next. Did you have any plans for your life, or what were you aiming at?
Oh, okay, yes. So yeah, I was growing in my faith, and of course I was praying about, where is God calling me? Is he calling me to religious life? Because we have these sisters here, I never thought about that before. So I was praying about that, and then I was also praying, are you calling me to married life? And I always felt called to married life, but I feel like most people have that feeling. But I remember I had a couple guys come through my life that we were just friends, and while we were just hanging out, we never officially dated or anything, I would tell them, I'm looking for a solid Catholic guy to eventually marry. And all of a sudden, they would be interested in the Catholic faith, and they would start going to church all of a sudden with me. And I was like, oh, interesting. And my mom would always be like, they're only doing it for you. And I was like, really? And she's like, yes. And then I realized, yes, I can't tell guys what I'm interested in my future spouse to be doing. So I stopped telling guys, what I wanted. I wanted to meet a Catholic that was already going to church and took his faith seriously. I always remember Scott Hahn, I think, said, keep your focus on Christ and run straight to him, and then one day look around and see who's running with you. And I always thought that was really a good thing to remember. So I tried to keep that in mind for myself. So once I graduated UNF, I started grad school at UNF for the physical therapy program. And there was only 30 students that got accepted into that program for the whole year. So before this, all these guys that kept coming through, I was just like, oh, I'm done. And I was like, God, I just give you my heart, and there's no way my husband's gonna be in this program. There's only 30 students. I'll just meet him when I'm working, It's just you and me. Help me grow in love with you throughout this program. yeah, I started the program, and there was this really tall guy at the program, and we had met the weekend before we started because we had done a volunteer thing with all the PT students. And I found out he was Catholic because we were driving there and there's a Catholic church we drove past. I was like, oh, I didn't know there's a Catholic church out here. And he was like, oh, you know, I looked at Catholic churches when I moved here because I'm Catholic. And I was like, oh, me too. So we started the physical therapy program, and he would sit next to me. I never thought everything went like this over me. Like my mom says my guy radar was broken, and it totally was. Like I had no awareness. But we started the PT program, and he would sit next to me, and then I ended up getting in a study group with him and his roommate and 2 other people. And so we would study together every night, like with this group, you know, we'd all get together, we'd study for the thing the next day, and then it was funny because I would come home and I would say, oh, Nick this, Nick that, Nick something, you know, my mom's like thinking in the back of her mind, you know, who's this Nick guy? And I'm not thinking about it. But I had mentioned to Nick at one point, oh, you know, I go to daily mass if you ever want to go. And he was like, oh, sure, you know, and because he had come to the Catholic Ospreys things with me a couple times because I was involved in that still. And so I told him about daily mass, and it was at 6:30 in the morning, which is extremely hard for anybody to wake up for, I feel like. But so he said he would go, and I was like, oh, great. So I came home and told my mom, hey, you know, this guy from my PT program, I got him to go to daily mass. He's going to come to daily mass with us tomorrow. And she was like, oh, really? You know, on the outside. And she's like, who is it? And I was like, oh, it's Nick. And she's like, yeah, okay. So, you know, there's like maybe 20 people that are at mass at 6:30 in the morning. So you walk in, it's always the same people. And then you see this one tall guy, like way over here, his sideburns like down to here, you know, and good looking, you know, tall, dark, and handsome for me. But my mom was like, bing, 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 bing. I know where that guy is not normally here. And afterwards, she was just like, you know, I was like, this is Nick. He goes to the program with me. And my mom was like, you know, but she'd been burned by all these guys that have like liked me before. So that's how I met my husband, yeah.
The way you lived your relationship with Nick, was it different? Because I guess after having that encounter with the Lord and giving your heart to him, it must have been different. Did you live that relationship differently?
Yeah, so it was completely different. We were really good friends actually before we ever thought of dating. I don't know what Nick was thinking about, you know, when we were being friends, but in my mind, I was like, yeah, he's a great friend. I really like hanging out with him. And one day we were like going somewhere and he asked me to go to the movies. And we had seen this movie preview with our friends on the TV one time. And he was like, do you want to go see that movie? Remember when we saw the preview, we all thought it looked good. And I was like, yeah, sure, it sounds great. And he was like, okay, great, you know, and we're driving in the car. And then later that night, we were talking on the Facebook chat. And I was like, so did you talk to Thomas and Brent about what time that would work for them to go see that movie? And there's like a long pause, like nobody's saying anything. And he was like, I was just asking you. And then I was like, oh, you know, like on the Facebook chat. And he's like, but I don't want to talk about this online. I want to talk to you in person. Let's meet before class. And so I obviously did not realize he had asked me out on a date. So we met the next day before class. And he was just like, you know, I really like you. I want to pursue, you know, getting to know you better, you know, kind of like that, putting that out to me. So I was like, okay, yeah, I think I like you too, you know, and it'd be good for us to get to know each other and hang out more. And then that's when I like dropped the bomb on him, because after that relationship in high school that was bad, I had seen and heard of people not kissing before they got married. And I was like, a light went on and I was like, yes, that makes sense to me. And so like all through college, I hadn't kissed any guys because I knew when I kissed that guy in high school that I put the rosy colored glasses on and I looked past all his faults. So I didn't want to do that again. And that's what changed all through high school. And so I told that to Nick. I had never told that to any guy before because we never like dated. But since Nick now wanted to date, I was like, I'm gonna save my next kiss for my husband. And he was like, so after a year of dating, and I was like, for my next husband. You know, he's like, well, what about if we get engaged? And I was like, on the altar of marriage. So he was like, okay, you know, and he says like in the back of his mind, he's thinking there is no way. And he says that I gave him a hint that maybe I would be okay to bend this and maybe we could kiss before, you know. So that's when we kind of started dating, and we held hands and like kissed on the cheek and the forehead and stuff. We just didn't kiss on the lips.
How did you fulfill that promise that you had made? My next kiss is for my husband. I know there must have been struggles. Did Nick eventually agree with you? Was it worth it in the end?
Yeah, so concretely, we set a ground rules before. So obviously my ground rule was we're not kissing on the lips. And we always knew like if we shouldn't be alone in a bedroom together. We could be in family rooms, never lying down together. You know, so we set all these ground rules of physical, like where are we gonna go physically in our relationship? And it's just kissing on the cheek, holding hands, sitting next to each other, that kind of thing. So that was concretely what helped us. And then aside from that, we would talk about things. We would talk about our feelings about our relationship. We would talk about past experiences, like why are we here today? And what do we see for the future? And like we'd pray together, and we made God the center of our relationship. And it was a struggle for Nick the first year of our dating, because he didn't have the 4 years that I had to prepare to not kiss anybody, you know? And so he would always bring it up, be like, well, you know, can we kiss? You know, this is really a struggle for me, and all these things. And it was like such a struggle that we almost broke up over it a couple times. And I was just like, you know what, God, if this isn't the guy for me, then this isn't the guy for me. You've called me to save my kiss, and I'm not doing it. So if he's having trouble with this, take him out of my life. But obviously he didn't. And we prayed a novena like in a year of our relationship to St. Joseph. And on the 9th day, Nick came to me and was like, okay, I see the benefit of this and I'm okay with it, but I'm not gonna say it's easy, but I'm not gonna like pressure anymore. And so from then on, it was a lot easier in our relationship. And we finished out our 3 years of PT school, and we got engaged, and then we got married like maybe a couple months after. And so on our wedding day, that's when we had our first kiss after the whole wedding mass.
I'm sure you see now in your relationship the fruit of that sacrifice.
Oh yeah, there's definitely fruit from it, because since we didn't put the physical aspect as the most important thing in our relationship, we talked through a lot of things. We talked like through the spiritual aspect of our relationship and the mental aspect of our relationship, like everything not physical. I mean, the ultimate physical, obviously, we still held hands and everything, but we settled a lot of problems before we even got married. And so since being married, it's been a lot easier. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy, but I think we've avoided a lot of problems that could have been caused if we had been intimate prior to marriage.
Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure your testimony is going to help a lot of people, especially for women, because you have shown us that the woman has to set the bar high in the relationship and stick to it. And you found your strength in the Lord and in prayer. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for your testimony today.
All right, thank you, Christina, for having me.
Friends, I've ran out of time. We have to leave it here with Lauren and her testimony. Stay strong in the Lord. Thank you.